welcome. My name's Lycia Heath. I'm CEO of Women for Election Australia. We're a for-purpose, not-for-profit, with a mission to inspire and equip more women to run for public office, be that at the local, state or federal level. I would like to do an acknowledgement of country. I am coming to you from the land of the Gadigal and the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future leaders as well. Feel free to note in the chat which land you are joining us from today. But for those of you who are new to our In Conversation series, the whole reason why we run these events is for the first part of that mission. We inspire women, we equip women. And our In Conversations series is run to inspire women to consider getting involved in public office. Like I said before, that could be running, could be helping someone else to run, could be learning things for a career launch in 15 years' time. But we encourage active citizenry and people getting involved in government in Australia. So we find people are very, very informed on the negatives of getting involved in politics, but not necessarily as well informed on the positives. And that is why we run these events. So, and to that end, our first event this year, I'd like to welcome Shelley Hancock, Minister Hancock, Minister for Local Government in New South Wales and the member for South Coast. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you, Alicia.
Look, we're going to start way back, if that's okay, because your political career started on council, so in local government, when you ran for Shoalhaven Council circa 30 years ago.
Yes. Longer than that, actually.
Longer than that? All right, well, we won't go into the numbers, but I think, take us back to the months preceding you running in the council elections. What was it that made you want to step forward? Was there a catalyst? Was it a slow compounding reason? Just shine a light on that for us.
Okay, well, at the time I was a teacher, a secondary teacher at Allmale High School, and a young mum. My kids were only little then. And I became involved on various committees, as sometimes you do as a young parent or an older parent. Having said that, not always younger parents, but I was involved in a tourism committee, and then I was asked to join a committee which was advocating for a new public heated pool facility in Ulladulla. So I joined those committees, and somebody said to me, you should run for local government. And I said, no, I'm a teacher. I haven't got time to do that, blah, blah, blah. As you do, or I can't do that. And I don't have any confidence in my own ability to do that. But, one thing led to another. I guess the catalyst was somebody asking me or suggesting that I should run for local government. And that started me thinking. I spoke to my husband, I spoke to my friends. And I think at the end of the day, if you can get encouragement, as I did from others, about what you're considering is a good thing to do, then you consider it. And I didn't expect to be elected at all, but I was in 1987. There we go, going back a bit. But I was having to balance that with my teaching career. And of course, that was difficult to start with. But then my high school was very cooperative. They were able to change timetables so that I could take, not have any free periods during the week, but have Tuesday afternoons free period and let me go to council in Nowra, which was an hour away. So there wasn't a particular catalyst. Somebody suggested to me that I should run.
Yeah, okay. It's amazing how often that happens, and we're finding that in a lot of the different workshops that we run. I'm getting some reverb, so maybe somebody's not on mute. But I think, so often this is part of the Inspire piece, isn't it? So many women have extraordinary skills and already are doing a lot for their community, more skills than they realise often. And it is transferable.
It certainly is. And it's very often when you're on a committee, you are determined to achieve an outcome for that committee or the purpose that committee has been brought together. So, if you show determination and you show that you're confident, I think that demonstrates to other people that maybe you should run for council and have a say on council to advocate for better facilities, whether they be parklands or playgrounds or streetscaping, whatever the projects are that are important to a community. Sometimes people can see in you something that you can't see yourself. And that's perhaps determination, compassion, passion, all of those things that you cannot see when you're just a younger woman.
Yeah. Yeah, very well said. Well, you were on council for nearly 10 years, I think it was. So can you give us some tangible examples of how being involved on your local council, what that ended up resulting in for your local community? Were there particular things that you were advocating for in that decade?
Oh, absolutely. And I was there for 17 and a half years on Shoalhaven City Council. So I was representing the southern ward of Shoalhaven City Council. So even though you're a councillor from the entire council area, I naturally gravitated to representing the southern area for which I was elected. So clearly I started off with advocating for on these various committees for better facilities, a heated pool. Well, now we have a fantastic heated pool. It took a while because you have to be patient. These things don't come overnight when they're $3-4 million budgets, and that's a long time ago now. So it was quite a high budget. So we have heated pools. We've got great streetscaping in the township of Milton, a beautiful heritage town. We've got public toilets, dare I say, in the main street that were really awful and not conducive to a heritage town. Now they're heritage designed. We've got I got involved with the disability committee too when we were looking to upgrade the Milton Theatre, and some of the people in the street said, well, don't spoil the front footpath. People with disabilities can go around the side entrance. So I said, hang on, they should be able to come in the front entrance. Cut a very long story short, we redesigned that whole Milton Theatre so people with disabilities could come in exactly the same way as other people came into the theatre. And I mean, I guess if I drive around Milton and Ulladulla now, I can see the tangible results of some of that advocacy. And that was sometimes the local roads too. People contacted me about local roads or parks that needed to be upgraded. A whole host of projects that you can look back and think, well, that was a big fight, but we won in the end. And you have to then fight with your other councillor colleagues who are from the north and the central Shoalhaven, who maybe don't want the money spent in your ward, but in their ward. So you're always on a fixed budget in council, but you have to be patient, really patient, and you have to be really determined to achieve what you know in your heart is what the community wants and deserves and what you want to achieve.
So always advocating for the community. I go back again because it's something I see time and time again. I see so many people advocating for their community in different capacity, but not necessarily in an elected position. So the advocacy skills are present. Yeah, so many women all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so 17 years on council, you would have learned a lot in that process. Then you decided to run for a state seat. And keeping in mind that people on this call have all sorts of background, be it may have run themselves, may have been elected themselves, to just at the very outset of the learning. So, and it's often quite opaque how everything works. So tell us about that period of time. Had you been considering running for a state seat for some time? Was there an opportunity that suddenly came up? Were you already on council as a Liberal member? Was there a pre-selection process? Like how did all of that work?
Yeah, so I certainly had never considered running for state parliament. Again, I was still school teaching and doing council and juggling my life with a local with our own business, small business, and my children were still young. So I certainly never had contemplated running for the seat. I wasn't a member of a political party, but again, the elections were coming up in 2003 and somebody suggested that I should run for the state seat of South Coast. And again, I think I said the same thing I did in 1987 running for council. Oh, I couldn't do that. I can't do that. At that stage, I was certainly confident about speaking in council, but that was 12 people around the table and perhaps a gallery now and again. This was quite different. And I just thought, no, I'm not ready for that. And anyway, again, somebody suggested I should run for the seat. It was a Labor held seat and gave me a lot of encouragement to join the Liberal Party. And my father would have been very pleased that I'd done that. But I had never been a member of a political party before, but I did, rest is history. I joined a political party. I had to go through a pre-selection, and of course, because I didn't know anything about the Liberal Party, I didn't even know what a pre-selection was this year. And they're not the greatest experience. They're probably the worst experience that you go through, even worse than an election, even though that's a huge event. Pre-selection is difficult. But anyway, I won the pre-selection and went on. 2003 was a time when the Liberal Party was not expected, or the coalition was not expected to win that election. We certainly had a chance in the seat of South Coast, but I was a kind of unknown, I suppose. I hadn't had, because I didn't have this history with the Liberal Party, I'm sure there were people who had doubts about my ability to win the seat. Even though I had a bit of a profile in the southern part of the council, I didn't in the northern. So anyway, yes, on the night, I think I was as surprised as anybody that that was the only seat that we won, besides the National Party seat up north in that election. So I was just in shock, really. I thought, well, I'm going to have to learn about all sorts of things now in state parliament. There I was. But I had resigned from teaching in 2002 to undertake campaigning because I didn't think it'd be right to be continuing to teach and campaign for a party. I resigned from teaching early, and that gave me time to campaign full-time for about 5 months, which isn't a long time. It's not a long time when you're running in state parliament. So, look, I've had the best time in council in particular. State parliament also fantastic, but you're a bit more remote. I mean, I'm not remote from my community because I'm here all the time, or most of the time. But council issues are definitely the issues that are closest to the community, whether it's tennis courts, streetscaping, as I said before, parks, off-leash dog areas, whatever you name it. They are local issues and they are of huge concern to the community. Clearly, with state parliament, there are issues like schools, because I've had an interest in education, clearly. I wanted to make sure that Ulladulla High School, which had come to have 32 demountables on site, clearly in a very fast-growing area, was something that we should be resolving. And I took that to Parliament. I spoke in Parliament about it many times when I was in opposition. And we finally got through, and there was some funding that came through, and then we finished the complete reconstruction or enhancement of Ulladulla High School. So that was a huge issue. So schools are important to me, but also roads. You know, we had people, a number of fatalities on the Princess Highway, and we still do. And so that was of concern to me because I knew quite a few of those people who'd lost their lives. And even though people say, well, it's not the road, it's the driver, well, you often have drivers, you might be driving very well yourself, but somebody else is driving foolishly and is not aware of the dangerous sections of the highway, can result in the loss of their own life or an innocent party's life. So those are the issues that become important to you when you're in a state seat. Those definite issues of roads and schools and policing, crime, all of those then take over, I guess, what you're thinking about all of the time.
Yeah, okay. In particular, I mean, of course, there's different at local government, state government, federal level. There is different policy priorities in each of those areas, as you've just discussed. You found yourself in 2003 in state parliament. I've certainly heard at the federal level about Senate school. You know, the new senators turn up. Is there and they get to shuffled off to Senate school for a fortnight so they can learn some of the learn some of the procedures. Yeah. Did you get to enjoy something like that in 2003?
Oh yes. I think it was probably 2 or 3 days of intensive member school, if you want to call it that, when we were introduced to the procedures of Parliament, because they're really quite complex. So it's when you can speak, when you can't speak. What are the times of the day when private members, when you call private members, that is private members' business, when you can raise issues pertaining to your electorate. So I didn't know any of that. As I said before, I hadn't been involved in any party, and I'd never really I hadn't been a watcher of Parliament, so I didn't really know. I knew there was question time and it was called the Bear Pit, but that was about it for me. So there was a lot of learning, and it was really interesting, quite complex. It is still a complex system for new members to navigate when they're first elected, but it's okay because you do navigate, and there are always members of staff, the staff of the Parliament, to assist you, and they're just fantastic staff. They really are, whether it's the Legislative Assembly or the Council or the Department of Parliamentary Services. They are there all of the time to assist members with any questions they have. However silly you think they may be, it's like council. Don't think questions are ever too silly. Ask questions. I had to ask questions all the time in council about, because the engineers would be talking about building roads or something or other, and they'd be talking about theodolites. And I had to say, what's a theodolite? And it was looked at me like, you don't know what a theodolite is. It's a instrument that they use on the side of the road to make it straight, flat, or whatever it is. So all those kind of questions about technical matters. I was an English history teacher. I knew nothing about this stuff. But it's, again, ask questions. If you're in doubt, ask a question. Ask for support, because the support is there.
Yes, well, I'm glad to hear it, and that the support is ongoing as well, regardless of what level that you're entering at.
I still ask questions. Yeah.
All right. Well, that makes me feel better for anyone that we ever help get elected.
Yeah, good.
Now, I'm just going to pivot slightly in terms of focusing on Canberra. We've seen terrible events unfold there in the last week in terms of harassment, particularly of younger women in the workplace in Canberra. Now, you've been in government at the local level and at the state level, not in Canberra, well, not yet, anyway.
Not ever.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we've got that on record. What has your experience been of the workplace at those different levels?
Well, look, I guess I was privileged in Shoalhaven City Council that when I was elected, we had 5 out of 12 councillors who were women. So it wasn't as if I was the only woman that I felt isolated or alone. I had other women who'd been there longer than I had.
That's unusual.
Very.
Yeah.
Very, and there's still 5 out of 12. Some councils, as I become Minister for Local Government, I realise have no women, which to me seems very strange. But, that's the way it was. And I found the males on Shoalhaven City Council always really supportive. It was, I think, because there was a balance of women versus men, we all sort of got on really well together. So I was really lucky. And when I was elected into state parliament, again, and I know what we've all heard about Canberra and the rest of it, but again, I found a really supportive workplace environment. Maybe I was fortunate. Maybe that wasn't the same for everybody else, but it certainly was for me. Maybe I was confident enough. Maybe I had a little bit more experience when I was first elected to state parliament to know if something had been offensive to me, I would have known what to do about it. And I would have done something about it. I wouldn't have kept it myself. I would have gone to the people, as I've said before, in state parliament who were in positions of support for all members. But some people don't know what to do, where to go, perhaps, or they don't want to, or, it's a real dilemma. But from my experience, I've never had anything but a supportive workplace environment. And I want to say that to the women out there who might be considering running. I think for the majority of workplace environments, I think state and local and federal too, I have to say, have worked very hard to put in very good procedures and practices to ensure that members and staff are supported.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly glad to hear that. As an organisation that its whole mission is to help more women get, elected effectively, we feel an extraordinary duty to make sure that when they are elected, that we have elected them into a safe workplace. So
I think it's important that we convey the positives. We've heard a lot of issues and some of the negatives clearly that have occurred tragically and awfully, but we should concentrate on the positives and the positive achievements that can be you can receive when you're on local government or in state parliament or federal parliament. And that is achieving something for your community. And I know it's a cliche to say making a difference, but that's what you can do. You can have a demonstration, or you can rally and all the things that can be really effective. But if you're sitting around the table making decisions, especially in local government, then you can make change. Whereas if you're outside and you're not around that table, it's much harder. You have to run campaigns and protests and all that sort of thing to have your voice heard. But by goodness me, it makes a difference if you're sitting around the table.
Yep, you're speaking our language. I'm not going to lie. that's everything that we're out trying to do at the moment, and we're going to talk about some exciting things that your office and Women for Election is doing in the coming months shortly. In state parliament, you mentioned the bear pit. So obviously our view is it's easier to make it a bear pit if there's less bears. So how easy or difficult is it to get to know other women cross-party in the chamber?
Well, quite easy if you make the effort to do that. If you want to retreat to your office, and we're all busy. I'm very busy at the moment in my role as Minister for Local Government, but it's up to you to reach out to other women. And I have lots of women on the Labor side of politics and Green side of politics and crossbench who I get on with really well and enjoy conversations that I have with them because I get a different perspective from talking to them as well. I think if you just stay in your little bubble, you don't learn, you don't grow, you don't make friends, and you have a pretty lonely existence. You learn to hate. Sometimes I see some people on one side of politics, just their aim is to hate the other side. We hate you because you're not us. We hate you because you're Labor and you're not Liberal, and vice versa. And we hate you because you're Green, and we just hate you. I see too much of that, especially this term of Parliament, where there is not much interaction occurring because it's more toxic, I find, than the other 3 terms or 4 terms that I've been in Parliament. I don't know why, but that doesn't stop me talking to the people I've got a colleague up the road who's a Labor colleague, a member for Shell Harbour. I talk to her all the time. We don't have time to socialise necessarily, but I'll call into the Whip's office. How are you going, Anna? Blah, blah, blah. Because these are people I've known for a long time. And after all, it's irrelevant what party you belong to, really. It's about your electorate. Your electorate should come first, and about what you achieve for your electorate. And therefore, we're all there for the same reason. We have different ways of looking at things, but we're all there for the same reason. That's to look after our electorates.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Clearly we don't want it to be more toxic because that invites less collaboration, and you need collaboration to get things done. So, we are trying to make sure that those bear pits are filled more with people who are interested in collaborating, regardless of the party.
Absolutely. And Lucia, I have to say too, and the others who are listening, that it's generally question time to which I'm referring in terms of its toxicity, and that sometimes comes out of the chamber. But members from both sides, all sides of Parliament, work very well in committees. They are really committed to an outcome for the particular committee that they're sitting on. So they work really well together, and they all collaborate really well together. It just seems to be question time is like, let's get down there and hate each other, which is so sad sometimes.
And that's what gets the publicity in the media. Obviously, nobody's ever talking about the committees happening behind the scenes.
No. We never hear the good news stories. Exactly. We don't hear good news stories about councils either. They're always doing something wrong, or they're making decisions we don't like. But we never hear the good things that councils are doing. I do now because I'm the minister. And I know that there are councils that have got themselves into trouble. But there's so many damn good councils out there delivering for their communities, in particular in my area, because of the dreadful bushfires that we had to endure last year. And I mean, that was catastrophic for this region. And our councils worked so hard with the assistance of other councils, say Sydney City and other councils, who are reaching out to our councils to say, can we help you? What can we do? It was like this big family of local government. And it was such a good thing to see. And it happens when, I think Australians do that in times of trouble. We just do come together, and they did. It was good.
Yes, it was lovely to watch and through COVID as well, when all the non-partisan assistance came together. It was truly inspiring, and it inspires more people to get involved as well.
Absolutely. Yes, it does.
Okay, so now I'm fast forwarding to 2011, where you were appointed Speaker of the House, which meant you were the first ever woman to hold that position in the New South Wales Parliament. So what did that first mean to you personally? But then in addition to that, was there something cognizant that you wanted to bring to the role that possibly hadn't been there before, or were you just trying to do the role?
Well, in terms of the first question that you asked me about, what did being the first female mean to me? probably meant more to other people than me. So often people introduce me as the first female speaker, and so they see it as an achievement. Oh, the first female speaker, isn't that great? They've all been men and up until now, and for more than a century. And I didn't think much of it, really. I still don't. I don't think that's it. Look, it's important for other women to see that as a possibility. Like Julia Gillard as Prime Minister, we can see that you can achieve this. You can be elected. You can become a minister. You may not become speaker because that's a bit more difficult, but it's achievable. So in that respect, it was an important first. And there are lots of firsts for women in New South Wales Parliament and in federal Parliament as well. And we just looked. I went to the funeral last week of Councillor Lillian Brady. She'd been in Cobar for 43 years and mayor for 20. And I'm sure she would have run again in September if she hadn't passed away at the age of 93, and still absolutely loved and committed to her community. So there's commitment for you. And the second part of your question, what did I want to bring to the role? Look, I think every speaker wants to actually change the nature of their bear pit. They want to make it a more pleasant place, if not for their own benefit, so they don't have to put up with difficult problems during question time. But I also wanted to bring to the role a sense that I was available for members of Parliament, especially new ones who were elected over time, that if they didn't understand something, they could come to my office. If there were staff members who were concerned about, their role in the Parliament, they could come to my office. I always felt that way. And also to bring some changes to Parliament House, like we established a parenting room for the first time as Speaker, along with the other presiding officer. We were able to have 3 offices converted to a beautiful parenting room, because I didn't want women elected with children with nowhere to go and breastfeed their babies or have cots. There was also computers there that they could work, beautiful decals on the wall. That's the sort of thing that I wanted to advocate for, because there were young people being elected into state parliament and they did have young children, and we needed to help them, because I wanted to make sure that any future woman who was considering it didn't find it too hard. And so state parliament now is a better place for women. It certainly is. We also changed and we called it the Luku, I don't know if you recall, but the men, because the men had dominated state parliament, they had this huge change rooms with ceiling to floor mirrors and massive area. And the women had like a cubby house. And so a few of us women got together and we just simply changed the 2 around, and we took over the men's toilets and they took over ours. They had to agree, mind you. They couldn't disagree. So we did we took out the urinals and we did a few things, and now those toilets are for women. And they're the change rooms, just not toilets, change rooms for the gym on level 4. So they were little things to show, well, we're here too. We have a voice. We're women. Why should you have changing rooms that are 3 times the size of ours? And we couldn't change the building, but we could change where the change rooms were.
Well, that's a nice laundry list. Like, as for a start, I remember holding a Women for Election conference in 2017, where I was an attendee actually in New South Wales Parliament House, and you were there at that stage, as was Sarah Mitchell, who was heavily pregnant.
Yes.
She was a Nationals MP at the time.
Yeah.
She's now the Minister for Education, but she had a toddler at home and she was heavily pregnant, and she was attending this event to support other women to run. So
amazing.
It was amazing, and it was quite inspiring to see that as well.
Especially this year, if I might add, that some of the women who attend these functions don't live in Sydney. It's not like driving 20 minutes or catching a train to attend these functions or advocate for women or advocate for education. They're living in rural and more remote parts of New South Wales. And so they're away from their families, and they're relying on their families sometimes to care for their children, or they might have their children in Sydney with them. It depends on the circumstances, and that's up to them. But it's very difficult. So these are great sacrifices that women are making for other women, so that they can say and show, like, I am a speaker, I suppose, or was a speaker. And Sarah was saying, I'm pregnant, and now she has 2 little children. I've got young children, but I can do this. I can balance my life. I can achieve this. So that was a great example of of Sarah, and I'm glad you raised that because I remember that workshop.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, I've got one or two more questions, but I did just want to prompt everyone that if you have questions, and I see you've already posted some in the chat, which is fine, which I will come to shortly. But in the interim, your department, the Office of Local Government, which was fantastic news for Women for Election, have joined us in partnering to run workshops across New South Wales,
Yes.
regional and a couple of metro workshops as well,
Yep.
specifically to inspire and equip more women to consider running in the September local government.
Specifically. Yes, that's right.
It's September 4. Put it in your calendar now if you don't have it. And I noticed a couple of people saying they're already running.
Well, absolutely. But September 4 is, of course, the election. But if you're thinking about it, you better think about it very quickly because there are obviously candidate nominations that are opening in July. That's coming along pretty quickly. Then there are close of candidate nominations. Too late if you come along in August and go, oh, well, I think I'll run next month. Too late. No. So you have to put all the dates in your diaries about candidate nominations opening and closing, then caretaker periods for council and pre-poll commencing, all of that. You have to think about that. And it sounds more complex in a way than it is. You can do it. You can do it. I did little kids and it worked.
Well, look, and that's why we're running our workshops in April and May for exactly that reason.
Yes.
And to make sure all the dates are in diaries, show people, just uncover exactly what the role of a councillor is, but also how to get elected and to have that self-belief about the positive impact you can have for your community when you are at that decision-making table. I think you've touched on it a little bit, but New South Wales, sadly, is the state with the fewest number of women on council currently. And I know that's why you are so incentivised as stepping into the new ministry when you did, or sorry, it wasn't a new ministry, you were the new minister, to really make sure that we're no longer on the bottom of the table at New South Wales. Why is it so important to you beyond that, though, that we have more gender and cultural parity on our councils?
Well, it's quite simple, really. We have 50% of women that make up the population of the state. We should have 50% of women. That's the first thing. It's common sense and it's obvious to me. But secondly, I think women bring a different kind of perspective to decision making. I wouldn't say they're calmer because I've seen women who aren't very calm, but it's not a matter of personality so much as if it was like me, I suppose. When I was a young mother, my perspective was for community facilities and parks and the things where I took my kids and where I saw deficiencies. I'm not saying the men don't share those aspirations, but they have quite different views sometimes or different goals for their communities. And very often we share the same goals, clearly, because mums and dads take their kids to the park, so they can have the same views. But I think women bring a diversity of views. It's about diversity here, and I'd like to see a greater diversity amongst, even with our Indigenous community, a greater. And when I joined Shoalhaven City Council, we had an Indigenous representative then. In those early days, it was fantastic, and I learned a lot about the Indigenous community from him at that time. So, look. To me, it's about encouraging women because we just need more women. 31% of councillors as women is so unsatisfactory. It's not representative. It's not right. We need to change it. And if we can change it a few percentage points, I'd like to get it over 40 for this election, but if we can change it a few percentage points and just continue to increase the representation, then you, all of us will have done our job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite disparate too, like 31%. Metro councils are okay.
Yes.
Some could be better, but four councils across the state with no women. An extraordinary number of councils with just one woman. A lot of these are in regional and remote parts of the state. So, which is why we're pushing into the corners of the state as well. Do you mind what party the women run for at the end of the day?
No, and I don't think, that it's certainly not my role to dictate to anybody or even suggest that they join a party
or
or run
ours?
independent or run it or join the Greens party, whatever it is. You should make a decision based on, your views and what you want to change, and go in with it with that perspective. Because it's up to you. I mean, it's certainly up to the individual person whether they want to have the backing of a party, or they want to go in on a ticket of another kind of ticket, not necessarily the major parties. It might be based on some other issue within an electorate, but no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's true. And as a non-partisan organisation, it doesn't matter for us either. We encourage people to run according to their value set.
Yep.
So I am going to go to the chat box now. I know we only have you till 1:45. So I'm going to pick some questions, particularly those that are occurring, more than once. Shelley, were you ever the mayor?
No, deputy mayor, because I was working full time, so I couldn't have been the mayor. Because I was still working, teaching. I was still teaching, so I couldn't have done full-time mayor and full-time teaching as well. So deputy mayor I was for a term.
Okay. So I've got a question here from Helena. In New South Wales, elected councillors are paid approximately $20,000 annually. I know that, more or less depending on where you are based. Are there any immediate plans to increase this payment? As the breadwinner for my family, it's a tough position to be in, to run with that income.
And I guess that's why when I started, it was about $3,000 a year. And I think that's a long time ago, clearly, but why I still kept working. So local government, the requirement is not for you to be there 9 to 5 every day of the week. That is not the situation at all. And it can be whatever you choose to make it. You can make it full time if you wish, and completely consume yourself with interaction with your community and every committee you can be on, and there are several of them. Or you can choose to balance it with your working life. But to answer the question, there are no immediate plans to increase. This is down to a local government remuneration tribunal. So they decide on the allowances and the allowances of councillors. And from time to time, there are representations made to them to increase that allowance. But I don't think there are any plans at this stage for that to happen. Certainly not before this election, sadly.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the question, Helena. One from Shelley, from Alison. Shelley, do you have any tips for balancing your public identity and your personal private life as an elected official? I live in a regional area, and I imagine it's more of a challenge to achieve that balance, obviously, if you're in a regional area versus a metro area. Any tips?
Look, it's very difficult to balance a private life, but you have to have a private life as well. You have to know that when you drive in your front gate, that people aren't going to be knocking on your door asking for you to fix a problem. So, and I don't think people want to do that, but you've got to understand that when I do my shopping, in Nowra, I have a great old time. It takes me 2 hours sometimes because I walk down the street and you talk to everybody and people want to raise issues with you. And you've got to be prepared to do that. You've got to be in a regional area in particular, people come to know you very well. And if you do not respond to that, I guess, that people approaching you, then you become the member that people don't want to talk, that people don't appreciate you, they don't like you. And you've got to go at the next election. And I'm lucky because I'm naturally kind of outgoing. I don't mind talking to people in Coles when I'm doing my shopping at all. And you go to a lot of functions. But when I go home, that's my space, my space, my family space. We come together, we have functions, we have barbecues, just like every other family. And I don't think people want to invade that space. They don't. But, when you have the local member living on your street, then you can expect more scrutiny than if it was just somebody else living there. So that's the situation in regional New South Wales. You know that people are watching you. They get to know your car, where you are. And I saw you at Coles, or I saw you Junction Street. They're aware of where you are and what you're doing more than they would as an individual kind of private person. Yes. But the tip is keep your private life private. that's been important for my family.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good advice. There are a couple of comments here in the chat, Shelley, in regards to specifically Wingecarribee Council, which is one of the all-male councils, I think.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I know you have a lot on, it's a long thing. I know you have a lot on your plate, but the situation here is vexatious. When people are in power for too long, their ability to remain effective is very limited. We need your help. So, I think my message possibly would echo your message, which is let's help some women get on Wingecarribee.
Absolutely. Right, council. I always say that if you're critical of your council and you don't like what they're doing, put your hand up. Put your hand up. But in terms of Wingecarribee, yes, that's an all-male council. And they tend to be argumentative, to say the least, and that's why, as the Minister, I've asked advisors to go into Wingecarribee and assist councillors with their behaviour towards each other. But again, change the way things are if you don't like them.
Yeah, well, there obviously are a few people on this from that council, so I feel like their shoulders are back and they're motivated to run. So, which is exciting, and get yourselves along to the closest workshop, which I think will be Goulburn. Anyone who's looking to run there.
Yep. Goulburn.
Now, sorry, I'm just going down. Will COVID-19 affect the normal LGA election process, i.e. candidate forums, polling booths, etc.? So obviously these elections were deferred, weren't they? So
yes, I deferred. I made the decision to defer the local government elections because of COVID. But we also had to give time for the Electoral Commissioner to ensure that all of the elections in September this year were COVID safe, and they will be COVID safe. Of course, situations might change in September. They may. He had to plan for screens. He had to plan for a whole lot of things in the event that COVID was still rampant. And we know we can't be complacent about COVID, so there will be a lot of those provisions still there, like the ones we see in the stores and shops and checking in, etc. But the public health orders are constantly changing, but nevertheless, they will be COVID safe, whatever the circumstances, and should be COVID safe. So we can expect the Electoral Commissioner, who becomes the manager of the elections, to make those decisions, but we've given him time and we've given him the funding required to make sure those elections are safe.
Okay. Yeah, well, the follow-up that is obviously about will pre-polling or postal voting be changing from the past?
Well, pre-polling...
Oh, in terms of longevity, will that be a longer period? Do you anticipate any changes to how local government elections have run in the past in respect to postal voting and in respect to the...
Postal voting still, pre-poll largely the same. iVote will be available this time at local government elections, so electronically. So there are easy ways to vote. But yes, again, we're looking at possible changes to postal voting at this stage, but more to say on that later. Yep. Postal voting is pretty difficult for local government elections, do I say? Pretty difficult. Whereas state parliament or state elections, you can just go in and say, they don't ask you why you're voting pre-poll. You just go in and say, I want to vote pre-poll. Whereas local government, you've got to have a reason, and it's got to be all sorts of questions. There are a certain number of circumstances by which you can vote by postal vote, but that we want to change that too, to make it easier, because people like postal voting as well.
Can you, just a couple more questions before we let you go. Can you give what's your guide in terms of time commitment for somebody that's on council, not a mayor, not a deputy mayor?
Again, as I said before, it's about what you're prepared to commit. Clearly, there are going to be council meetings once a fortnight generally. So once a fortnight, it may be for 2 or 3 or more hours, depending on the argumentative nature of the council. They can go on for hours sometimes, unnecessarily. So that's certainly, when you have an ordinary meeting, that's once a fortnight. Then there may be, before the council meeting, committees meetings. They may be 4:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, or 5:30 or 7:30. So there would be planning committees. There are all sorts of different terminologies for the committees. Finance, works, And then other smaller committees like crematorium committees, cemeteries committees, swimming pool committees, leisure centre, all of those other committees. So if you want to be on all of them, there goes your time. But if you choose to be on a number that really interests you, then that's your choice. You don't have to be on those committees. You are required to be at council meetings, and it's certainly advisable to go to the major committees that then feed into the council resolutions. So Works Committee then is decided by the whole council generally, and the recommendations come from the Works Committee or the Finance Committee, feeding into an ordinary meeting of council where those resolutions are stamped or agreed to or disagreed to by the entire council. So again, it's what you decide to devote to it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would make sense to me, and same for a state parliamentarian, I imagine, and a federal for that matter.
Yeah, probably a bit different. Because state parliament, you're a full-time, you have a full-time office, you have full-time staff. You are there on the job, a lot.
Oh, certainly on the job, yeah. That is a full-time job. In terms of your commitment, how often you're out in your community or things like that, it's what you make it.
You make. If you don't put in the time and the hours and the commitment, then you may find yourself not elected at the next election in 4 years.
Yep, I totally agree. So one last question in relation to, has there ever been discussion about quotas, be it gender, be it cultural quotas in terms of local government, at the local government level?
Look, not as far as I know. I mean, there's a lot of discussion that circulates a lot before elections about quotas, but there hasn't been that kind of same sort of, I guess, push for quotas at local government level. And I guess that's why we're trying to work with you to encourage women of their own volition to become a councillor. Because, again, I don't want to mandate anything. I don't want to say, well, you have to have 50% of women. We want to achieve that goal anyway, without me as a minister mandating that.
Yep. Well, we are certainly in it, boots and all, in terms of hitting the road. It'll be the Ruth and Lycia show, crossing the state in April and May. So if you are on this call and you weren't aware of those workshops, please take a look at the link that's been in the chat. We would be grateful if you circulated it through your networks as well. We both the Minister and Women for Election Australia want these events to be standing room only. I think that's an extraordinary message, particularly to male-only councils, but to many others as well. And that interaction inspires others to get involved. And maybe you get elected, maybe you don't, but just the fact that you are involved is often a great measure of success and outcomes anyway. So
absolutely, Lycia. And look, for the majority of people who run for election at local or state or federal, they don't necessarily get elected the first time they try, but they learn a lot from the experience of actually trying for the next time. And that can be frustrating when you don't win. You want to obviously be elected, but you learn from the experience. I was just fortunate that I was elected the first time and the second time, and then into state parliament, very fortunate. But I've known of many people who've just tried and tried and tried again until they're finally elected. So again.
Yeah, and the likelihood of election is increased significantly at the local government level versus a state or federal level. And if you have aspirations for that path, then it is an amazing launching pad as well.
Yep.
So now, look, thank you so much. We've taken you over time. Have thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you to everyone that was able to attend this event. Go to our website. Always consider looking at the other events that Women for Election are running at any point in time. We're trying to inspire and equip 2,000 women to run for public office by 2022. And we're looking forward to getting a proportion of those elected as well.
Here's to everybody considering it. Go for it. You can do it. You'll love it. You will love it.
Go for it. That is absolutely the final message.
Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Bye, everybody.